Welcome to the Euranet Plus Youth Summit, where we are joined by Roberta Metsola, President of the European Parliament. Roberta Metsola, I thank you very much for being with us here today.
Very happy to be here.
I would also like to welcome to this debate young journalists from different radio stations, from different European countries, which are all members of our Euranet Plus network, which provides information on the European Union to more than 13 million listeners. So hello, Cristina from Polskie Radio. Hello, Julia from Radio 24 in Italy. Hello, Božidar from BNR Bulgaria. Alexandre from Radio Renascença, Portugal, and hello Toms from Latvia Radio in Latvia. Thank you all for being online with us today. And I, Romain L'Hostis, your moderator for today. I'm a journalist for the independent and European radio, Euradio, which is also a member of the Euranet Plus network. So now, without further ado, let's get down to our business. I mean the challenges and priorities for young people in the run-up for the European elections in 2024. Roberta Metsola, you are the youngest president in the history of the European Parliament, and you have repeatedly said that you wished for a greater and a stronger participation by young people in our democracies. If I asked you to spend 1 minute to convince young people to go voting for the European elections, what would you tell them? Why should we vote?
So on the 8th or the 9th of June, depending on which country you come from, you are going to be asked to choose the direction that you want Europe to take, or your own country to take, for the next 5 years. We are sitting just outside the big plenary, which is the room where all members of the European Parliament press the button, take the vote that matters for your life. What you do every day, whether it is about your job, whether it is about the climate you live in, whether it is about the future of the opportunities that you can have as you live and work in the European Union. If you don't vote, the 720 chairs are going to be filled. You might not like what you see. If you don't vote, others will be deciding for you. But if you do vote, you can hold your elected representatives accountable. So choose, and choose for the best of your life.
Are you yourself running for the European elections?
Yes. This will be my 5th election. So you mentioned the fact that I am the youngest ever president, but I've been in politics for a long time because I entered as a young person and I wanted to take decisions for my generation without older people taking them for me, if you wish. And it is still the philosophy with which I do politics, that I think that each generation, especially in this election, where we will have 4 countries where 16-year-olds will vote for the first time, that they have to also be able to see a campaign where they want to be integrated, where they are excited about who they vote for, and then they can actually look for the 5 years, is that member of the European Parliament representing me well? And I think that that is really something we need to do better, and that will be, I would say, my campaign for the next 4.5 months that are left.
Continuing with one of the foundations of our democracies, which is the right to vote. You've started to talk us a bit about this, and more specifically the legal age to vote. I will now hand over to Julia from Radio 24 in Italy. Julia, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Roman. First of all, good morning, everyone. Good morning, President Metsola. Thank you very much for your time and for this opportunity. What I want to ask you is citizens aged 16 and 17 can already vote in European elections in countries such as Austria, Malta, Belgium, Greece, and Germany. Do you think that other countries should do the same? Thank you.
Well, first of all, you mentioned my country, where 16-year-olds vote, and I was very much in favor of that decision. And I remember being asked, do you think it is a good idea? And I was convinced, and I am continuing to be convinced in each country where I go, and I meet with 16-year-olds and I say, I think that those 16-year-olds should have the possibility to choose who represents them. I think the younger you are to be integrated in civil society, in enjoying and exercising your civic right and doing your civic duty, that's hence our responsibility to make sure that we are as engaged as possible in a campaign that targets those 16-year-olds in those countries. that you mentioned, because if you start voting at a young age, then you will recognize that civic duty throughout your life. Now, this might sound like a cliche, but we worked a lot for us to get the right to vote. Let's not forget that more people in the world cannot vote for their leaders than those who can. So let's embrace that, and why not give it to as broad a sector of our population as possible? And you know what, Julia, my experience is that if you ask a 16-year-old and then you ask a 25-year-old, what do you expect from the European Parliament, what do you want from Europe? Sometimes the answers are very different. You get questions about, I would like to have better access to education. It's not the same in all countries. Why doesn't the European Union do more? I would like to live and travel in the European Union. What are the opportunities for me? Why do I have a different type of access to medication? Why am I not feeling like there is equality among young people? Why is there a climate emergency that is sticking and the European Union has not acted quickly enough for it? These are questions that we are asked every day by young people, different ones in different countries, but it's really something that I leave every room wherever I go, every school in every country, thinking we did the right decision to give the vote to 16 in ours.
Actually, we have prepared a map where you can see in Europe how few are the European countries where they allow young people under the age of 18 to go voting for elections.
Oh yes, mine is pretty small. Oh yeah, and Greece is 17. Yeah.
Recently, Euranet Plus radio stations also took to the street to ask people from Generation Z about their expectations and priorities from the EU, the multiplications of wars, climate change, disinformation. Indeed, disinformation, but also political interference are a concern for more than 80% of Europeans, all ages included. With this in mind, I would like now to bring in Krystyna, our colleague from Polskie Radio. Krystyna, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be a part of this youth summit. So as long as we're talking about elections, I would like to admit that electoral disinformation, as every one of us knows, that propaganda and fake news have become, I think, a major threat to democratic processes in countries around the world. So what steps does the European Union intend to take for young people to make them more, let's say, resistant to fake news, to educate them in this fight, let's say, against this invisible enemy? And are there any new projects, new programs to combat disinformation in the biggest global election year in the history? Actually, 2024 is a really called global year in history if it comes about election.
Well, thank you a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Krystyna. In fact, next week I will be in Poland, and I have no doubt that this will dominate the questions that I will be asked by journalists, just as those questions dominated what I was asked in Latvia, in Lithuania, countries where you have seen a huge increase in Russian propaganda, for example, in the context of the Ukraine war. Similarly to what we saw in other countries, for example, in the United Kingdom during the Brexit referendum, during US elections, one after the other. We are already seeing it now happening during the primary elections in the United States. Now, from the European Union, we have legislated. In other words, we have the Digital Services Act, which places responsibility on regulators in order to create that safe space for people of all ages to be able to access information that is correct, that is not generated by artificial intelligence. We have the world's first ever AI Act, Artificial Intelligence Act. We will start to see its impact, perhaps not in this election, but in future elections, because of the increased use of AI in order to manipulate voter behavior, voter preferences. We see also, Krystyna, in this parliament as well, and this is a vulnerability point of view, that this parliament is very much the target of foreign autocratic states in order to try to influence votes. So we not only have to legislate, but we also need to create awareness. When new members of the European Parliament will be elected in June this year, they will come back and they will be told what to be aware of, how to make sure that we check our phones more, how to make sure that when we work on social media, what kind of campaign that we have, and this kind of meeting, the summits that you have right now is extremely important, because your diffusion of disinformation, that this conversation we're having, in order for your viewers and your readers and your listeners to see someone who's talking as I'm talking, and you take your decision as to whether you agree or not, but you know that it is me talking, and your channels provide the possibility for that to happen. So it's awareness, it's education, it's disinformation campaigns, and also legislation that not only gives us the responsibility, but gives our partners in the tech world the responsibility to uphold that truth that we need in this world for voters to make conscious choices on where to go in each election.
One of the main concerns of young people is also the environment. On this issue, there is a feeling that the EU is running out of steam regarding its climate agenda. Unfortunately, climate is not an issue that can simply be dismissed. My colleague Alexandre from Radio Renaissance has a question for you on this issue. Hello, Alexandre. The floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. Portugal is one of the countries in the world in which young people have more climate anxiety, and the concerns that were expressed during Fridays for Future seem now a bit far away, namely at the end of this parliamentary term, in which European climate ambitions are somehow weakened due to skepticism. How can European Union overcome this wave of discontent and tackle the climate challenge as a long-term priority?
Well, first of all, thank you, Alexander. Whenever I visit Portugal, one of the things that hits me best in a way is that Portugal is a leader in renewable energy. When compared to other countries, you are years ahead. And that kind of leadership is what we put in place in 2019 when we got elected. All of us got elected here, and were told approximately in all member states, especially by young people, climate anxiety, as you mentioned, what are you as legislators on a European level going to do? Because this can only be done on an international level. If each country does not have the same targets, then we will not be able to reach the global targets that we have to do in order to combat this emergency that is ticking, that is happening. We see it every day. I come from the south of the continent. If we look back just at last summer with fires and droughts, which in fact is part of the conversation we are having today, because it has wiped out around 20% of the agricultural sector of the European Union. And that is where that discontent that you mentioned needs to be bridged in the European Parliament. We have actually delivered on extremely ambitious climate legislation. The aim is for us to be the most climate ambitious continent by 2050 in terms of neutrality, in terms of trading systems, in terms of providing an example to the rest of the world. But we need to make sure that we have the so-called buy-in of our population. In other words, what are we going to do to cushion the social and economic impact of our legislation? If we don't do that, then we have people who either stop voting or who find comfort in the extremes. And my job, my colleague's job, is to make sure we find that balance in keeping the ambition, in making sure we cost our proposals, we make sure our small enterprises continue to thrive, our elderly population, especially in inner city areas, are not pushed away by our policies. This is reality. So I've been to countries where they say, I have a special type of anxiety, my grandparents have a different type of anxiety. We are the only parliament that can do something that brings them together. If we don't, we will lose everybody. So we will continue to be voting in this mandate on very ambitious environmental legislation. We have 2040 targets that are coming up in a few hours. We have scaled back as a parliament where we thought that the buy-in that I mentioned, in other words, how citizens feel included in the decisions that we take, was not enough. And therefore we saw the Commission withdrawing a piece of legislation on pesticides. Is it too late? Was it too early? Do we need to table something else? Absolutely. But what we need to make sure...
Is it not an obstacle to the realization of the Green Deal or the
I would say,
environmental policy of the EU?
What I would say is, let's look back. Was it a good proposal in the first place? Was it going to succeed? No. Parliament voted against, democratic vote. Council, governments were never going to vote in favor of it. So what we would expect from an institutional perspective is that when there's a legislation that cannot work, then the Commission withdraws it. Finally, that was done, and we are very happy about it because that's a legislative mandate, to put forward one that is workable. Because the risk is that we don't move and we remain stuck for decades. And then I cannot tell you, Alexander, that we are making progress. So we have adopted almost 40 pieces of legislation as part of the Green Deal, many more to come, including this week in Strasbourg and next week. If I can join it also with our economic packages, our migration pact, we are starting to become a little bit more interdependent in terms of our policy, something we never did before. We very much did it in silos. So anxiety is there. I can tell you, I have children who will vote for the first time in this election, and that's their number one concern. What are you going to do in order for you, from a legislative perspective, to address the climate emergency that we have? So balance ambition with a cushion for who is going to be hit, because otherwise we will lose them and they will find comfort in the political extremes.
This Parliament has also done a number of youth events, but they are sometimes criticized as being a bit superficial, almost empty, sometimes empty of meaning. These are a few comments we have gathered in some of our podcast, Euranet Plus network. Our colleague Božidar now from BNR in Bulgaria has a question for you regarding this issue. Hello, Božidar.
Hello, I'm very happy to be here and meet in this meeting. Mrs. Metsola, what is your strategy for fostering European identity among the young people, taking into account what you have already mentioned, that young people are very diverse and it's important to hear their various opinions and to hear their different voices?
Thank you for this question, Božidar. We have, in fact, quite a consistent question as to how are you going to include youth in your legislative process. And if I see the extremely excellent proposals that we got from the Conference on the Future of Europe, where young people told us, we want you to do more on education, we want you to do more on health, we want you to do more on climate. I would expect, and this will be our call, as we work towards the creation of the next European Commission, is that those considerations, the so-called youth check, is placed at the heart and core of every legislative proposal that comes out of the Commission and that comes to us as legislators in order to work with it. If it doesn't come at the proposal phase, sometimes I fear it's too late. A proposal is already boxed in and it's very difficult to change the parameters. Secondly, you mentioned the word identity. Identity is not just about what makes us the same, but it's also what makes us different. And that's the beauty of Europe. We are not about making everybody the same, but bringing everybody from all different countries with our different languages, different cultures, different traditions, and working together. And finding agreements across political divides, across national divides. Not always mutually exclusive, if I can say, because sometimes it is very nationally driven. But what I think we should do more, we have great events here. We are the only institution really that does this, bringing in thousands. We are in Strasbourg today, thousands of people that come here every couple of years. It's a great event. I attend all of them. Is it without content? Perhaps there could be more. Do I sometimes feel that it is the same people who come? Yes. So I think, and this is something that I would like to do more, is not only focus on capital cities, but actually get young people from rural areas, people who live far away from the capitals, who feel that they are forgotten, that the Brussels and Strasbourg bubble is very far away. If you are from Bulgaria, the one question I'm always asked is Schengen accession. How are young people from Bulgaria treated differently to young people from Hungary, from Czechia, from Slovakia, from Poland? Why is it that almost 16 years after we joined the European Union, we still cannot travel freely, a fundamental element of European integration, and hopefully at the end of March this will become partially a reality. So I think we can do much more in terms of content, but I would not only rely on those events, but rather streamline and make sure that youth and opinions that are expressed, as I said earlier, I did not used to like being told when I was young, you know, that your time will come, or wait. Rather, no, you have an opinion, it comes into our work now. And then I will go one step further. I would encourage more young people, including all of you, to run for elections. Because if you run, and I can tell you it is difficult the first time, my first election was very hard when I was in my early 20s, but I did it because I believed in it. And I said, if I don't do it, then I will not be able to encourage other young people to participate. And I think times have changed a lot. The average age of this parliament has gone down, not so much, but has gone down. Younger than in many national parliaments, actually. We can still do much more. And you can help us to do that.
Maybe one last question, if you agree, Roberta Metsola, on a different subject now, more strategic defense one. I will now bring in our colleague Toms from Latvia's radio in Latvia, who has a similar question for you.
Yes, thank you, Roman. Morning, President Metsola. It's a pleasure to be at this summit and to talk to you. One of the priorities in the upcoming years will continue to be security, and hence, President Metsola, given the diverse approaches to military conscription across EU member states, with some countries, for example, Latvia, recently reintroducing military conscription. On the contrary, Malta has never established a compulsory military service. So how do you perceive the policies of national conscription in the context of EU's efforts to strengthen collective security and defense cooperation?
Well, there is no doubt that the world has changed completely since the 24th of February 2022. But I also need to say mea culpa to our colleagues from the Baltic states, including Latvia, that had long been warning us before 24th of February 2022 that there was an aggressive expansionist neighbor of the European Union that was waiting to exactly do what it did in 2008 and 2014. Putin did not stop in 2008, he did not stop in 2014, he doesn't look like he's stopping now, and that has triggered the European Union to take certain actions. In most cases, with your country, Toms, at its lead, in order to be better prepared, in order to see the need, finally, for a true and proper security and defense union, in order to make sure that NATO has the capacities and the capabilities that it needs in order to prevent, deter potential attacks. We have seen the joining in NATO of Finland, and waiting, hopefully in the next days and weeks, for Sweden to join, pending the approval of Hungary, which is important for us, and we would call for that, but that is NATO. But at the same time, it is very much a core part of our discussions now in terms of how do we defend ourselves as a union.
But Europe is not the only voice inside NATO.
And that Europe is not the only voice. What will happen after the presidential elections in the United States after November? We need to be ready for a scenario where Europe could be alone and therefore needs to be prepared. In terms of, for example, help to Ukraine with 330,000 rounds of ammunition already, 1 million production that is currently ongoing. Is it enough? No. Will it be enough? No. But our commitment is unwavering. With regards to those countries that do not have obligatory conscription, you will understand that this is something that is decided on a national level, not something that can be dictated by the European Union. I can tell you, I am married to a Finnish man, and in Finland there is obligatory conscription. I come from a country that is militarily constitutionally neutral, and therefore this is not an option. So every country has its different reality, but it's each country also needing to think long and hard about its safety of its citizens, its defense, and how equipped it is in the case of the worst scenario.
Roberta Metsola, I thank you very much for your participation here today at the Euranet Plus summit, and thank you all for your attention.